I thought I would go live today and just to hang out with you guys, just to take questions, see what's been on your mind, check in, see how you're doing as we head into the holiday season, what kind of issues you're running into with toxic relationships, or maybe even just relationships in general. Maybe there's nothing like maybe there's nothing that's massively a problem, but you're just running into some normal hiccups that we all have from time to time. I know for me it can be a challenging time of the year because there's so many expectations. We have to show up a lot, show up in different kinds of ways. Often, at least for me, my time felt like it wasn't my own. I felt like I'm an introvert. So for me, going out in the evening is a lot of hard work. I didn't really enjoy it. I felt like I had to keep going out to going to these parties. Such a hardship, I know. But so I thought I would just check in with you all and see how you're doing. Let me introduce myself to you guys and we can talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. I'm Dr. Carrie Kerr McAvoy. I'm a clinical psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. And these days I primarily talk about mental health issues, mostly about relationships. That's my passion. I really love dealing with everything related to humans and how we get along with each other and what makes life go well or doesn't go well. And any of those of you who are familiar with my platform know that my big interest is narcissistic abuse, but it's not just limited to that I could talk about most stuff that we could hang out and talk about. So how are you doing? And what kind of questions might you have for a psychologist? If you wouldn't mind, please put a thumbs up in front of your question or comment so that I know you're talking to me, not talking to each other, because these forums can get pretty lively and it's hard to follow which thread. I often have a mod here. I may not have one tonight, so let me kind of talk about the rules of the room. We don't talk about my appearance. We don't talk about politics or religion, not because those things aren't great things to talk about. They're awesome things, but my platform's primarily about mental health, and this just gets contentious when we start to blend those things together. So I typically prefer that we don't. So with that said, how are you all doing? How are the relationships in your world going? And how is it on a Wednesday night? I would really be curious to hear how you're doing. So Dandy says, is it true that codependencies don't really love narcissists? That's an interesting question you're asking me, Dandy. It's been a myth to think that codependents choose narcissists. Yes, a certain percentage do. Codependency, let me kind of back up and explain what that is. Codependency really came out of an addiction model. If you looked up the definition of the term, you'd find that it's not in the DSM-5. It's actually a fuzzy term. We're not even for sure what we are talking about because each person has their own definition of it. Some people are referring to people-pleasing. Other people are referring to enabling behavior. Some people are talking about what happens in an addiction relationship where we're trying to stop the abuser, the addicted person, from hurting the family, hurting the relationship with their behavior. So it's kind of it's a fuzzy term. It's not a real good definition. I think maybe a better way to understand it is that there is a portion of us who have been habituated to be in relationships with people who are emotionally controlling and manipulative. Maybe we've come out of homes of trauma or dysfunction. But the majority of us, and this was interesting, came out of a study with Sandra Brown in 2014. She found that actually the majority of us have two personality traits that make us more prone to being targeted by abusive people. And that is the personality quality of agreeableness, which is actually the opposite of those who have narcissistic tendencies. They're considered antagonistic, not agreeable, and conscientious. In other words, we're rule-abiding or sensitive. We have an internal moral code, whereas narcissists and antisocial personality disorders, and even to some extent, some borderlines, that's not true of everybody, but a lot of those, though, tend not to. They tend to do whatever is in their best interest. To them, they would say the ends justify the means, and the ends for them is self-promotion or self-aggrandizement, something like that. So that was a long-winded answer to your question of codependency and narcissists. But yeah, it's a very interesting question. I appreciate you asking. So Julia, I'm sorry that you're having a rough day, that you've been in bed triggered and you're waiting for the medicine to work. Are you breathing? Are you taking nice, slow, deep breaths and reminding yourself that this will pass? Emotions are states, they're not traits. All emotions wear themselves out. So if you wait and pause And remember, this is just a bad moment. Doesn't mean you have a bad life or that you're bad. This is just a bad moment. It will help you get through. But to take some deep, slow breaths and just to remind you this is temporary and that you're here. I'm glad you're here hanging out with us today and that you're not doing this alone. So Drama in Pajamas. Man, I love that title. That's cool. You escaped from a psychopath and now you're living with a narcissist. Oh, and you're moving tonight. Well, good for you. I'm glad you're doing something about that and you're getting out of the relationship. Yeah, and Amy, thank you for saying that about you're trying to leave a narcissist, but you mentally are finding yourself stuck. That's called cognitive dissonance. It's chronic and persistent cognitive dissonance. I wrote a course with a workbook I published just this last month in October that specifically helps you to kind of break that confusion apart, why they feel like they're both bad and good, and why you feel like you love them and loathe them at the same time. So that if you want extra help with that, I highly recommend that you check out the workbook and or the course. You can work them together, or you can use one or the other depending on your situation or maybe your financial means. Tonight, I'm going to give you guys a code. If you use this code in my resources, everything that I'm selling, you'll get 25% off everything. It's called Toxic Free Club. Put that all in caps. Toxic Free Club. TOXIC CLUB. No, I'm sorry. I'm spelling it wrong. TOXIC FREECLUB. Toxic Free Club will give you 25% off. I highly recommend it. It's been vetted by several people who found it to be very, very useful, very helpful in identifying the thoughts that are making it very confusing for you, why you feel like both realities are true, why this is, it's a bad relationship, but you can't seem to let go, why this person's been harmful to you, but you also find yourself still very much stuck with feeling love towards them. And it's very common. This is the piece that helps connect and bind us, where there's a trauma bond, but what helps start the trauma bond is the mental confusion that we experience. So Simple Life in Louisiana wants to know what is the signs of narcissism? The older way of understanding it is based on 9 criteria. And that's considered the kind of categorical model of psychology. But there's a new model that's more trait-based. So it might be easier to think of these dysregulation or dysfunction in 4 main areas. And now I'm putting myself on the spot. I hope I can remember all 4 of them. The first is the ability to goal set and to have a sense of future and determine where you're heading. Those who have problems with personality disorders tend to not do that well. They either get overly rigid, or they're very impulsive, or they just don't have a good persistence at it. They have kind of overinflated ideas. A narcissist would have more overinflated ideas. Then there's problems with the sense of self. They have a hard time seeing themselves in the context of other people. They see themselves exclusively. Other people don't seem to exist in their mental landscape. They actually use people more like objects, more like tools. I like to think of it as they see people as like tools on their tool belt. And they use you the way you'd use a car or the way you use your phone or a television. You're not really a person that shows up with your needs, dreams, hopes, desires, and fears. You're just something that they utilize to advance their life or advance their happiness. They have problems with intimacy, and that's what I'm referring to, because they don't see you. They're not empathic towards you. They don't have a sense of concern about how you experience life and how they're affecting you. In fact, their self-focus makes them blind to the way that they're impacting you and the fact that it's harmful and negative to you. And then they have self-initiative, intimacy, self, and then they have problems with, and I'm plucking on the last one. Oh, empathy. That's the last one. They just don't have a lot of empathy. There's not a lot of a sense of other people. You kind of notice, though, what I just did was, it's like I took a Rubik's Cube. I sort of held up this one object, and I just looked at different sides and described the problems with the different sides. It's still all essentially the same thing, but they have problems with the way that it manifests. How they manifest themselves in the world is problematic. And you know, while we're talking about this, one thing I would love, I'm so excited. I've been sitting on this. I haven't really wanted to say until I was ready, and now is ready. It is that I just announced that I'm having a live webinar, a live interview with Lundy Bancroft. I don't know how many of you are familiar with him, but he's Amazon's bestseller in abuse for years. This book has been topping the charts for years. It's called Why Does He Do That? Lundy has worked with, I think, like 2,000 criminal inmates and identified the profile and the mind of the angry and controlling man. So if you find that you would like to understand what is abuse about, why, and particularly male abuse, what is going through the mind of a male, and why are they like this, and what's the effect on the family, and how do you know when it's time to leave? Is this a changeable situation? And we're not talking just about narcissists. We're talking about all forms of abuse, every aspect of it: psychological, emotional, financial, spiritual, sexual, all forms of abuse, physical. So if you would like to understand more of the mentality, the mindset, and what happens in the relationships, please see the link in my bio, because that just went on sale. We're selling it at an early bird ticket price right now for $30. After the first of the year, it's going to go up to $35. And then if you miss the event and then end up wanting to buy the replay, it'll be $40. So this is the best window of time to save money, is to buy it now. So user 85, 84, whatever, string of numbers, wants to know, is addictions a mental illness? Yes, it is a mental illness. It would be classified as a mental condition. So there are mental conditions and mental disorders. So disorders is part of our hardwiring. It's part of our personality. And those are the things that all personality disorders fit into a disorder. That also is anything pervasive and developmental. That's like problems with IQ or autism or ADHD. Those are things that are persistent and part of our hardwiring. So those are not conditions, they're disorders. And then there are conditions. Conditions are what happens to us. It's like getting sick. So when we get the flu or we get COVID or something, it's a condition. So addiction is a condition, is something that happens. We know something's wrong. We know this is not the way we want to be. We have this experience of being very, very uncomfortable, but maybe we can't do much about it. We feel like under the control of it. In fact, this was interesting. This was a study done with opiate users. They found that so when somebody has an addiction, they become more narcissistic in their personality style. They then analyzed them when they were in recovery and compared their personalities when they were addicted versus their personalities when they were recovered. And they found that most of the kind of narcissistic traits disappeared, that they recovered their natural personality, whatever it was, pre-addiction, returned. So that's the good news. If you're in a relationship with somebody who has this very negative qualities and you wonder, is this always them or is this from the addiction? If there's a pervasive, like profound addiction involved, I would say you don't really know until they've gotten recovered. Now, the challenge is, will they get the help? Because we all know trying to get somebody to get in and get help only makes us ill. It doesn't usually help them. So Cynthia says that she's been feeling a lot of loss and sadness. She had a son who passed away December in 2016. Oh, I feel you. I lost my husband, my first husband, in 2015 from cancer. And then I nearly lost my son from leukemia. And then my sister died this last year in June. I will feel emotional just bringing it up because I miss her something terrible. And this time of year tends to bring that up for a lot of us. It's a time of, we think of family. See, there it is. We think of family and we think of connectedness, and people are really important to us. And it's kind of a time of year that brings grief up. We're more aware of their loss. And so my heart goes out to you today. I feel that with you today. We can be sad to get together today. So can I talk about ADHD? Now, psychology is massive. Let me sort of just preface that psychology there's forensic, developmental, organizational, school, there's clinical. It's massive. And when you go into psychology, you go in specifically with a focus. And my focus was clinical, meaning I wanted to learn how to diagnose people. But then think of that. There's clinical when it comes to children. There's clinical when it comes to adults. There's the chronic diseases like trying to manage bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And then there's the more common things that you'd see in a private practice like depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder, those types of things. Then there's the personality disorder issues, those are kind of struggling relationship issues. I stayed away from a couple areas, and one of them was I didn't learn, believe it or not, and here I'm autistic. Well, it was new. The autism was really like the pervasive kind of condition of autism was first really identified. Doesn't mean it wasn't around. We just didn't understand it well until 1980 with the DSM-3. Same with the narcissistic personality disorder. That was also first time showed up in the DSM-3 in 1980. But ADHD was one of those areas I didn't really try to understand well. So I feel underqualified. I know there's what I learned, there was the hyperactive, the more the presentation of through body activity. And then there was more of the mental piece of the distractibility and the struggle to focus. Now, I know a lot has changed. I haven't even stayed current. So I can't really talk about it because of that. I just don't know enough. So I'm sorry about that. How can you trust again after 28 years of marriage with a narcissist? Yes, that is a struggle. Well, the big struggle is trying to heal after we're in these difficult relationships that really impacts our sense of self. We feel we've betrayed ourselves when we've been in these relationships. And so then we get very, very afraid that we'll do it again, that we missed some critical piece and that we'll get caught again. And once we get caught, we all know when you're in the middle of it, and I know the outside world watching has a hard time understanding why can't we just get up and leave. What they don't understand is that the intensity of the confusion. It's not like you have a bad boss who's consistently bad to you every day, who doesn't maybe even pay you on time or pay you at all. It's not like something that's persistently one way. It's a confusing mess. The minute they sense that you're leaving, they begin to love bomb you and they show up in the way that they originally showed up. And you think that you met the real person. You don't know that that was a facade. And then they threaten you. They usually do something that intimidates you or scares you, or they use something to leverage and blackmail you emotionally in the relationship. So it is not simple leaving. So yes, trust is a big piece, because part of what happens with the trauma bond is an erosion of sense of self. They want it their way, and then they sort of systematically, like the water torture thing where it drips on you, they just work away your sense of self and your self-identity and your self-esteem. So you walk out really having lost yourself, because remember, narcissists have to have everything about the world for them. So you gave up your interests, the foods you like, how you watch TV, how you spent your evenings. They even probably affected your sleep. They probably had an opinion about how you dressed. Mine had an opinion about how I hung my clothes. He actually had a lesson. Here I'd been married 30 some years to my first husband before the marriage ended in death. And I raised 3 sons, and this guy is teaching me how to hang clothes. And I was the primary laundress in the house. Like, I didn't know how to hang clothes. But they have to have things their way. So yes, you do lose yourself. How do you regain it? By trying to do little simple things your way and experimenting. Go back to the things that you used to do that were important to you. Remind yourself of the old dishes that you used to eat. And then take risks and try new things. Remember, in a way, you want to kind of envision this as if you're starting over and you're just sort of challenging yourself in new directions. So that's how I'd recommend it. It's really important to do skill building to learn how to cope with the anxiety. That's why the group coaching with Trey and I are really helpful. We're starting up our second session in January for 6 sessions. It's called Reclaiming Inner Peace and Confidence. It's 6 sessions of skill building to help you handle the anxious part, the fearful part, but also how to reclaim your life again. So if you're interested in that, please check out the link in the bio about that, because it's going to be fantastic for those of you who are feeling sort of like tentative and unsure and kind of like mentally still caught up in there. It's very, very helpful with that. So I am like 50 comments behind, and I was working through them one by one, so that's not going to be very practical. I'm going to try to go back to the front. If I missed your comment or question and you really want me to address it, make sure you ask me again so that I know what it is so I don't miss it. Yeah, a lot of you are sharing. Oh, thank you. A lot of you are sharing your experiences living with narcissistic people, about how It's back to this, what I was saying earlier, and somebody complimented me, which is one reason why I say, don't say that. Don't tell me that, because see, I'm blushing now. But thank you, Lacey, for the compliment. I appreciate it. But I prefer we don't talk about my looks. It always makes me feel so weird. So I have issues around, even me being able to like look at myself in this. I wouldn't let anyone take a photograph of me for years. I lost my hair when I was 36 after I weaned my third child. And it destroyed me. It psychologically, I had nightmares. I was traumatized by hair loss. A horrible experience. And people would tell me, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And then they would face having lose their hair for something. I had, like, for example, I had a family member who had to have brain surgery and they're going to shave her head. She cried for weeks over a temporary problem. I knew it would come back in a year or two, but she acted like she was dying. And yet when I told her how bad I felt about losing my hair permanently, oh my goodness, oh yeah, well, it's just hair. No, it's not hair. For women, hair is not just hair. It's part of what we have that defines who we are. So these days I wear wigs, and then my narcissistic ex made it a big deal, like it's some big secret that he and I had, like, hell with that. It's not a secret. So that's why I tell everybody I wear wigs, but I still feel self-conscious. So that's why we don't talk about my looks. But thank you, Lacey. I appreciate that. But we've been talking a lot about how narcissists affect everything, the whole dynamic, how they affect the family, how they affect Thanksgiving, how they affect Christmas, how they affect our relationships with our family members, like if it's like an in-law, with the children or grandchildren. It is amazing to me about the degree that they do that they just warp the whole world around themselves, around the relationship, and it has to go their way. And this is what I'm going to give you a secret. This is what really confounds us profoundly about narcissistic behavior. We assume that people are disinterested in things that don't involve them. Well, with a narcissist, when you're the only person in the world, literally to them, they're the only person in the world, everything involves them, and they see everything as a zero-sum game. So there's winners and losers. So when you win, you're taking something from them, even when you're not. But in their world, it's always a loss. They don't want to see you happier. They don't want to see you have a good life. Most of us, I think, I would love to know what you think, but most of us ignore other people's lives for the most part. I don't really know what my neighbor is doing. I know what car he drives because he parks it in front of the apartment, but I don't care he drives a Mercedes, whatever. I'm happy with the car I have. But see, to a narcissist, that would be a loss. How dare he have the Mercedes? I deserve the Mercedes. Why is he in the life position to have a Mercedes and I'm not in the life position? Actually, I think my neighbor has a BMW. Why is he in the position to have that kind of car and I don't have that kind of car? See, that's how they see the world. They literally see it like a win and a lose. So all of this makes a problem. They don't want you to have better relationships with the grandkids or the kids. They don't want you to have Thanksgiving or Christmas at your house or Hanukkah or whatever the celebration, because you might do it better than they do it. They see it as literally like you're taking away from them and it's a loss. And they're not looking for just us to kind of cooperatively get along and everybody mind their own business. No, they're looking for their sense of right and wrong, and they want it to go their way all the time, everywhere. And so they're just passing on the misery. They're passing on their unhappiness about the unfairness or perceived injustice of life onto you and making sure your life is messed up and as miserable as they fear their life is. Now, the reality is a lot of their lives isn't that bad except for the decisions they make, but they don't see their decisions as problematic. They see that their decisions make sense. Remember, I said to them, the ends justify the means, and the ends is their goodness, whatever they want. They want their supply or they want whatever. They don't see that all the decisions they're making are messing this up, that it's impulsive or lacks judgment or fails to have a reasonable consideration of what they can bring to the table. They don't see that. It's this very warped perspective of win and lose. So that's why they mess up our lives. That's why they weigh in and they fuck it up, frankly. And they make every situation so difficult, is because it has to be their way. They have to maintain power and control, and they have to be right. And so somebody said, Ms. Mysterious Sagittarius says, so I mean nothing to them. It's not even that. It's not that you're a nothing. It's that you simply don't exist mentally to them. It's worse than nothing. And nothing would be to say, I see you mentally in my mind. You exist in my mind. No, you don't exist in their mind. They simply don't see you. So let's stand back, way back for a second. Okay, so mine was a serial cheater. I didn't know that when I met him. He hid it for over a year that he was serially cheating. Amazing how he could do that. He had like 7 people he was seeing at the same time as me. I mean, how sick is that? You would think he would care about the impact of the cheating on the relationship. No, I didn't matter. I simply didn't exist in his realm. I wasn't even a consideration. He never saw it as hurtful to me because I never existed. What existed is his momentarily pleasure, what he was pursuing. And I was just part of what he was pursuing. I offered him a better life that he thought had a right to have. And maybe this person offered him, thrills on Friday night. And somebody else offered something else. I don't know. So it wasn't that he saw me and didn't care as I was a nothing. He didn't even see me. Which is really, no wonder it does so much damage to our souls. Because we want to be seen. We have a need to be seen, and they don't see us. Yeah. My ex called me. Sunshine says, my ex called me. He wants to be friends. Seems to not want nothing from me. Watch out for that, guys. That is a common, I'll bet you if I had a moderator here could ask this as a poll, how many of us have been contacted by our ex, narcissistic ex, and asked if we continue to be friends? Yep, he contacted me too. Why do they do that? Well, for a couple reasons. Remember, I said that they have a zero-sum game perspective of the world. It keeps tabs on you. By having you around in his life or her life, it allows them to have a little insight into what you're doing and how you're doing and what's going on in your life. It's just a way to kind of keep their thumb on your life. The other is it keeps you open for the option of if they get into a bored period of their life and something, nothing good is happening, it gives them the ability to then pop in and tap into you again just to keep themselves preoccupied and interested. So be really careful about this because hoovering is always a problem. You are never not an option. Remember, you're a tool that fits on the tool belt to this person, and you never not be, maybe you're the hammer they don't like anymore because they've got a newer, better hammer, but they still keep that old hammer because if something happens to the new one, they may need the old one, right? That's what I do. I keep everything around in case I need it someday. So be careful. It puts you at risk. Be very, very careful. How does someone seek help when you don't have insurance? Yes, that's a common problem. I don't know what country you're in, if you're in the United States or not, Dog TV too. So in the United States, there's the marketplace. So if your income level's in the right level, you can have help with compensation for that. And right now is sign up. So I'd make sure you check that out as a possibility. You can often, this is what people would do with me. They would come in and say, I'm uninsured. Can I make a private arrangement with you? And some clinicians will do that. Other clinicians won't. So you may have to do a little bit of shopping. You might want to also consider coaching. This would be another alternative to having that, but it's going to be out of pocket. And again, maybe you can negotiate based on your income level. But I know it's tough. It's a really tough situation. And I have about 15 more minutes today, and then I'm going to have to head out. But I'm so happy to hang out with you guys, and thank you for following me. I appreciate that. Can I talk about OCD? Katie wants to know about OCD. So OCD is an obsessive compulsive disorder. By the way, did you know there's a personality disorder that's OCD as well? It's OCPD. It's obsessive compulsive personality disorder. They're very different things. OCD is an anxiety condition. OCPD is a personality disorder. They don't even manifest like. An OCPD, a perfect image of an OCPD is to go watch the movie called, it's with Mary Tyler Moore and, I'm blocking on the name. I may have to it's a perfect rendition of OCPD. They're very controlling individuals. They have to have things exactly their way, and they're very strict about what they want. And it was with Donald Sutherland and Mary Tyler Moore is the movie. And it's an older movie from the 1980s. And Mary Tyler Moore. That's a perfect example. So OCP or OCD is an obsessive preoccupation with some fear. Could be Ordinary People. That's the name of the movie. You want to see a perfect example of OCPD, watch Ordinary People. The Mary Tyler Moore, the mom in that story, is a perfect image of a obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Very tightly controlled, emotionally rigid and shut down, very black and white in their thinking, and not very empathic or connected to other people. Now, OCD, however, is an anxious, kind of an obsessive, anxious process, which you have a particular concern. It could be around cleanliness or germs, or I've seen it manifest about anything and everything. Could be anything. I had somebody who was afraid to be hungry. I had another person who was afraid to get married to a guy she loved. Somebody else is afraid they weren't going to be the perfect mom. I've seen it, fears of driving on the highway, fears of being in the middle pew at church. I mean, it could be literally anything, a fear of sheets being dirty. I mean, anything, could be anything. But you have all these rituals that develop around this condition as a way to manage the fear. Now, the sad thing is that the more you participate with the rituals, the more you strengthen the habitual habit and fears. So it's the way out of it is to actually kind of use desensitization methods to unlock the connection that you have. It's really hard work. I have a little bit of OCD. Mine's more of organization and cleanliness. It's not germs. I just like things organized and clean. And I've had to work that out of my head, really work hard not to, because the more control you give it over the life, the more control it takes and the more it consumes your life. How long does cognitive dissonance last after leaving a relationship? It lasts as long as you have not broke apart the realities, which is why that course is so helpful that I've developed called First Steps to Leaving a Narcissist, because it helps you to actually identify the dual reality you've set up in your head, the confusion, the loving, the loathing, the good relationship, the bad relationship, the good guy, the bad guy, or the good woman and the bad woman. It helps you sort of to identify them and then begins to help you break it apart. But unfortunately, unless you actively work on it, it doesn't get really better, which is the bad part. That was what Sandra Brown said in the webinar. I did a live webinar, and if you want to see it, the replays are available in the link in my bio, is that 75% after we get into one of these relationships struggle with trauma, that these relationships are traumatizing. And part of what's traumatizing is the cognitive dissonance really leaves a lasting impact. So it's really important that you address it and address it directly. And the two ways I would recommend is to work through that course. Mine's the only one that I know of right now out there that helps you address it from a psychological standpoint. It's kind of like being in therapy without being in therapy. And then the other is to get into the skill building group with Trey and I. That would be very, very helpful as well. I'm trying to keep a watch on my time because I'm going to jump over to my premium private club. We're going to have a group meeting tonight, a group online video meeting. So if that's something you're interested in, where it's just a private group, Zoom, where we can see each other and talk once a month it's a small group, premium group, and you can join through a membership. Again, the link is in my bio. Yeah, so I've got 8 more minutes before I have to leave it. Oh, Lisa, thank you. Lisa's here. If you guys are not following Lisa Sonny, she has a wonderful trauma recovery program. It's fantastic. And actually, her and I we are friends, by the way, but it's a great joint thing to do to break the cognitive dissonance and then to break the trauma bond, because they fuel each other. They're like lock in. They're different, but they're the same. They lock into each other. So the confusion keeps you in the trauma bond, and the trauma bond, because you're connected, helps keep you confused. So really, we should sell them together, Lisa. We should bundle them together, honestly. But that would be the ideal, is to do both. Her trauma bond recovery course or workbook, and then my First Steps to Leaving a Narcissist. Oh, so Ladiska Mama. Oh, and so SJ's here too. And by the way, they both, SJ as well as Lisa, both offer coaching. Fantastic coach. I refer people to them all the time. OCPD. So your dad has OCPD. Yeah, they're very controlling individuals. Very, very controlling individuals. Oh, you guys were helping me by telling me it's Ordinary People. I had to go look it up. But that's the perfect. Now, if you want a perfect view of a borderline personality disorder, that's That is Alex Forrester on with Michael Douglas in that movie. I'm terrible at movies tonight. Yeah, you know the movie I'm talking. Fatal Attraction. That's a great one. He actually is a narcissist. I would say he had some kind of covert narcissistic traits. He was like, what, me? What did I do? Well, dude, you had an affair is what you did. I mean, you kind of set the woman up and then you walked away on her and you're surprised why she's coming unraveled on you. I mean, he sort of like has no responsibility. There's just crazy things happening to him. So isn't it interesting to watch how these get played out on TV or in movies? I find it really fascinating. Yeah, some of you are now talking about social media profiles and what you have to do with protecting yourself. It is so essential because one of the things that happens is you've been traumatized by this relationship. And yes, you want to follow this person. It keeps you connected for one, but it also, in a way, helps you to feel safer because you feel like you know what they're up to and know what their life, but it doesn't really help. What it does is it keeps your autonomic system, your fight or flight part of your survival mechanism on high alert because every time you look, you know you've got that jolt of like, I do. And my heart races and my hands get clammy. So it's really important that you keep the space, like give yourself the break. Now, I know those of us who are parenting can't do that we can't get away from this person. We have to see them to maintain contact at some level in order to coordinate custody issues. Or if we're in the legal battle, that's not another thing that's really not easy. This is a great question. I'm going to take this as my last question and then we'll have to pop off. But I'll be back on tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central Time. So I'm going to talk tomorrow at length about sense of self, how we develop good self-worth. So if you're interested, please join me tomorrow at 1 o'clock Central Time. But how do you know if someone's just immature versus really a narcissist? We're all on a spectrum, from kind of have a few unpleasant kind of selfish traits to all the way to where we can't even see people and appreciate people or real people. Now, how do you know that where you are on that spectrum or someone else is on the spectrum? It's the degree they have self-reflection and ability to really appreciate and see other people. And don't mistake in this quality, because this is where we miss it with the covert narcissist or the vulnerable narcissist. Wanting sympathy does not mean you're empathic. They're very good at eliciting sympathy from us, but they are not empathic when it comes to other people's pains and misery. They're just preoccupied with to the degree that people see how unfair life is to them. It's still like egocentric perspective. So watch that. Are they able to share the floor? Do they show up and care about what's happening to you? And be careful in the beginning because they can do it temporarily, but they can't sustain it long term, and they won't do it in other places of their lives. You won't see it at work, and you won't see it with the family or with casual people that take care of them, like the waiter or the waitress. I one time saw my ex lose it at the airline counter. I would see him be cruel to other people and even brag about it. He may have been really great to me at the time, but he wasn't being nice to everyone else. So pay attention to that, the ability to respect other people as people. So I'm going to have to pop off because I'm going to jump over to that premium Facebook group. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock Central Time. We'll be talking about self-worth, how it gets developed, why it gets eroded in narcissistic abuse, and how to reclaim and rebuild it after it's been damaged. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.